This is episode 88 of the Wilderness Locals podcast. On this episode, Wacey and myself have our weekly check-in. We talk about arrow building and kind of the state of the industry. Basically, be nice to everyone and tune your damn arrows. This episode is brought to you by Kifaru International, the toughest hunting gear on the planet. Right now, Kifaru's just launched 2 new packs and a fishing rig and all kinds of stuff, so head over there and check it out. Kifaru.net. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Just Shooting Arrows, BC's premier archery shop. What's happening?
Not much.
Your names when you log into these things are always so fun.
Yeah. Big gun.
No big gun.
That was gay pride for a while.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of asked you, like, hey, maybe don't make a gay pride. Who do we have on? I can't remember.
Barklow.
Oh, yeah. I was like, Barklow probably doesn't want to know you as gay pride.
What's going on, man?
Nothing. Just feeding babies for a living, I guess.
Are you goat hunted right out or what?
No, I had an awesome time, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've honestly been trying to figure out how I'm going to frame it for the podcast, because I like to be completely transparent with folks. That's a real dangerous hunt. That's not a hunt that you could take lightly, and that's not a hunt you could go into. Like I could never do that hunt by myself or with guys that have the same amount of knowledge in that terrain at that time of year as I do. I took Avalanche safety training 1, and I used every bit of it. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna sit down with the boys that went on that trip and do a podcast. But also, I think I gotta lead the front end of that podcast with hey, hunting's fun and everything, but this one isn't a hunt to take lightly,
No. Is it usually cold in that part of British Columbia?
Yeah, but not that cold. When we were hiking in, it was negative 29, right? And I know Alberta hits negative 55 and stuff like that, but I mean, I think out west it's a different cold because you're also just you're not dry ever, right? You're just you're battling moisture the entire time, and in that kind of cold, it's you make a couple bad mistakes, you'd end up dead, I think.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. No, but as long as you're mitigating risk and you're kind of checking in with each other, I think it's definitely one of the more fun hunts I've been on. I mean, and there's a lot of stuff that sucks about it, but I mean, that's kind of part of hunting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know. I got to figure out how to frame it responsibly, right? It's not a hunt I think I would ever be like, go on, go. Yeah, definitely. You should do it. It's sort of if somebody was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this hunt, I think I would probably be like, well, here's some stuff to think about,
How long did you wear your snowshoes up the mountain? All the way to the top or what?
Yeah, pretty well. There wasn't a lot of crampon wearing. I have a funny video that I'm on the fence about posting on the way down. One time on the way down there, where the snowshoes were fully just acting as brakes on a I don't want to say controlled, but on a pretty wild ride down the mountain. It was pretty funny, but snowshoes were good. Yeah. Yeah. It was, it was very similar to the stuff that you and I went up in August on that mountain. Just a little bit steeper in some spots because of the snow.
Yeah.
But
hiking up in snowshoes wasn't a big deal.
No, it's a lot of work, but it was cool. Just dig them in good, right?
Yeah. What else?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. There's lots going on inside of hunting right now. There's lots of controversy, lots of people freaking out. Yeah, all kinds of fun stuff, eh?
I don't pay attention.
That's a good call. I think in this last hunting season, my perspective on what's cool, I think, has changed a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just I don't know, man. Like, we were actually talking about it the other day, you and I, and like, I don't want to call anyone out because I don't think that's our place, and I don't think it's necessary. But at the same time, it's like I'm getting real tired of like the like elitist attitude inside of hunting. Like, oh, if you don't do it my way, don't bother, bruh. You know?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of egos,
like,
right?
Yeah, it's just like
in hunting, there's a lot of big egos.
Well, that's just it. It's unnecessary, I think, and like I don't know, man. It's like a lot of these people, the way that they act on social media is like, if you acted like that in real life, you'd have no friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, 100%.
I just don't really understand it, man. It's like, like I was raised to just be nice to everybody. If you don't get along with somebody, you just don't talk to them, right? And like, and like, I don't know, man, like this one particular page on social media right now, it's like they do these Q&As and people ask them stuff and they just completely rip them a new one.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why they do that. It's weird. It's obscure. I don't know. Just trying to be cool, I guess, or something.
Yeah. I think when people act like that, they're just driving the wedge in even further between, different types of hunters, right? Like you and I will take the piss out of people. Like we'll joke around, but it's pretty clear we're joking, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, just be nice to everyone and shut up. Like if you don't agree with somebody, hit them up in private or something. If it's something even worth discussing, but like if somebody's wearing QU or something and we wear Sitka, it's like, it's not worth the bullshit.
Yeah. It's a weird space to be in sometimes. It never used to be like that. It never ever used to be like that when I was coming up hunting as a kid. Everyone was so nice, right? And they, unless you were like a couple guys trying to get permission on the same property or something. But other than that, it was like everybody got along really well. And this social media kind of new dynamic to everything.
Yeah. And I just mean like, I just, I don't know. And like, I understand the competitive angle, right? Like I get it. I get the competitive angle, that makes sense. But it's sort of like the further we get into this hunting industry thing as two kind of normal dudes that, aren't trying to make a living here, the kind of the more grossed out I get by the way people act.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, you just want everybody to like, focus on the stuff that actually matters, like instead of fighting about nonsense, like focus on the real fights, like focus on the giant changes in hunting legislation that come at us every single month, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm quite convinced that the anti-hunting groups aren't going to quit ever.
No,
they're going to keep going until I'm dead and or until they get everything taken away, because they're pushing forever. It was never an issue. Like when Alberta lost its grizzly bear ban, or lost the grizzly bear hunt because of the ban, that was pushed in. And like most animals, they hid it behind the Endangered Species Act. But I feel like nobody was aware of that at the time. Now that social media is present, like you could be up to speed in a second. You know? So it's tough.
Yeah. And I just think like there's such a good opportunity for the hunting community to come together a lot. Especially around this stuff. And then I don't know, you just see people just aggressively driving that wedge in further and further is all. And it's just like, I don't know. It really pisses me off. And it's like, I think it's totally okay to have your own beliefs, your own ethics, your own opinion on regulations. If you don't want to shoot a 2-point deer, I definitely wouldn't take the piss out of somebody that wants to. You know what I mean? If you don't believe in the spike fork moose season in BC, I definitely still wouldn't take the piss out of somebody that does. You know, it's like, sure, that might not be for you, it might not be for me. But at the same time, like, that guy's following the regulations, and we don't know his story. Maybe that's his first whatever, right?
And if it bothers people so bad sometimes with some of that stuff, they should just try and talk to him. Don't be a dick. Don't be a dick. Just go, hey man, how's it going? Love your moose. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Why not? Why not?
Just talk to him.
I mean, yeah, and don't be an asshole, and don't set out to hurt their feelings. And I think that's a lot of what social media has become, is like this backhanded effort in like, it's like super passive aggressive, like super weak, like I'm mad at this guy, I'm gonna make a meme. Like, what the hell? And I'm not saying this because anybody's done this stuff to us. Nobody ever makes fun of us. I mean,
not yet anyway.
Well, I'd invite them to. It'd be great. We're two guys that don't give a shit about what anybody thinks, so it's fine. But I just don't get this whole like elitism inside hunting, and people, like, I think it's important to hold each other accountable, but at the same time, I think it's also important to be respectful of other hunters and what they're doing and what their beliefs are, and yada yada yada. It's just, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking to society in general, not just hunting. I just really see it inside of hunting, you know.
So what else is new? Not much.
Yeah, just kind of getting my stuff back together after this goat hunt. Gonna start working on some bows here. I have a new compound arriving pretty quick, which should be cool.
Are you gonna hunt that this year much?
Well, I think we're gonna hunt mule deer in Alberta this year, right? So yes. I'm thinking of bringing that down south, right?
Get some distance.
Get a little distance out of it. Like, I'd love to hunt with the stick, but I think, what was it now, 2 years ago, I got spanked by those mule deer down there with the compound. So I'm not sure it would be a wise decision to go back down there with the recurve. And I think with the recurve in a lot of those places, you can just expect a beating, eh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't think, what the hell's his name? Lander. I think he said he's only had a handful of guys, including Snyder, killing that country with the recurve. Like, it's pretty tough going, eh? Like, if you can get a good stock and get a shot, but then deer keyed up, you know, tough going.
Yeah, that one deer that I took a shot at, I didn't realize that he juked and jived the way he did, and you guys were like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Oh man, I just missed." You're like, "No, he jumped the string for sure."
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty wild.
I had a whitetail roll out of my way, and I was on the ground, and he was like 20 yards. As soon as I was with the compound, as soon as I hit the trigger, he rolled out of the way. Well, I've seen it before. They're quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never had that happen. Like I've obviously missed deer, but I've never had one just peel out like that. Like go full Keanu Reeves as soon as the arrow leaves the bow.
What kind of bow is it? PSE or what?
No, Matthews. What is the new one? A V3X, I think. Yeah.
I don't even know what they call them anymore.
The compound bow thing is a little bit funny. Like the yearly release of the same thing that is a couple percent better.
And everyone's just like, yeah.
Everybody's hyped all the time. They're like, I got it.
I want to buy this $2,000 bow.
I have to completely reset up my entire rig and retune arrows and do all this stuff, and it's going to take months before I can shoot it again properly. Yes.
Do you know what's crazy to me? But
awesome.
And I used to shoot a compound, so I'd always pay attention to the new releases back in the day, and is how they do not keep their value. A gun, if you buy a gun will keep its value pretty darn good. If you buy a recurve, custom built recurve, you're not going to lose a pile of money. Even a factory recurve or a longbow, you're always going to be in that ballpark. And if you really want to move it fast, you'll drop a couple $100, right? With a fucking compound, like instantly when you take it off the rack and pay for it, it's like, say you pay $2,000, nobody wants to buy it unless it's $1,000. Like it's like they don't hold their value at all.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, I got into this thing where every year I would get a new bow, but when the bows came out in whatever, December or January, I would grab my bow from Lucian and then I would sell the bow from the year before, like right away. And I'd lose a little bit of money, but it was a good way to stay current. And I don't know, I was always trying to learn whatever the latest model was, and I would jump around between bow brands for quite a few years there. But no, you're entirely right. I think like when you buy one of these flagship bows, the plan is either to keep it forever or sell it like in 9 months, you know?
There's no doubt in my mind, like you could buy any one of these bows they have today, and that thing would be really relevant and current in 2030. Like they're not changing that much anymore. Like I think we've hit a peak on what performance is.
Oh yeah. Right? Oh yeah. And the other component of it too is like, if bows start getting too much faster, the arrow technology is going to have to probably change, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
or guys are going to just have to start shooting 250 spines instead of 300s. I mean, 300s is kind of what everybody shoots out of, a 70-pound bow, right?
Back when I was shooting compounds, I always wanted to get my hands on a Matthews. Always.
Yeah.
They were always just dead quiet, eh? Like they were the quietest bow fucking around, just dead.
Yeah.
But I never did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had 1, 2, 3. This will be my 4th Matthews. I like them, but I'm not very brand loyal. Like I shot PSE, like I shot a PSE last time we were in Alberta a couple of years ago. I've shot Hoyts, I've shot all kinds of stuff, but no, I mean the Matthews is a good bow. They're like you say, they're dead in the hand. They're quiet, which is a dead in the hand thing. I don't understand why everybody's so. It's dead in the hand. But the arrow's already gone. Who cares? I don't care if it freaking shocks me if it's real accurate and quiet.
You know what I think in the compound world that a lot of guys don't understand, and it really opened my eyes when I went to wood bows and learned how, because with a wood bow, you're kind of stuck, right? Like you're tuning the arrow to the bow, right? You don't have any rests to move unless you're shooting a springy, but you're kind of you're kind of stuck, and you learn how to spine an arrow properly.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys that shoot compounds, they don't, and their bows like twang, like they could take, that's so sound out of a compound is unused energy, right? Converts into sound. So if you actually had a good, properly weighted arrow, your bow would be quieter. You know what I mean? And you shoot a heavier arrow. And I see it. I see guys come around. I had a buddy this year. He hit a few animals with his current setup, and he phoned me. He's like, man, I'm at a crossroad right now. Like, I'm not getting pass-throughs on whitetails. He's like, just barely getting in. I'm like, yeah, you need to. And it's hard too, because you're like, well, why don't you, you don't need to shoot iron wills, but get it yourself a good fixed blade. Because it's hard to, when you say the price of an iron will to some people, they're like, there's no way I could put that on the end of an arrow. But they won't bat an eye. They won't bat an eye to spend $200 a dozen on arrows, $2,200 on a PSE carbon, and all this shit, and $600 on boots. But when it comes to the actual part of the arrow that does the killing of your whole setup, that does it for killing, they're like, no,
$499.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, give me the cheapest fucking shit you got. Oh, what do you mean it didn't open? What do you mean it bent? Oh, that cost me a big white tail. But anyway, he had a come into Jesus moment, and he phoned me and we talked, and I told him, I'm like, well, if I was shooting a compound, I'd be shooting a 550 grain arrow, or find that happy medium. I think there's no reason guys that compounds shouldn't be shooting 500 grain arrows. Fucking, they got a lot of energy to push. If you shot a 500 grain arrow, 550 somewhere in there with a iron will on the front of that thing, fuck, that's a shoulder destroyer 9000 right there.
Well, I mean, I'm shooting out of my Matthews last year. I'm shooting a 520 grain arrow. With what did it have up front? 150 up front? No, 160 maybe. I had a collar on it too. And I mean that setup will, like, I mean, it'll punch through a fence post. Thing's stupid.
But and then you get the other side of it. Everyone wants to shoot a 400 something grain arrow with a fucking expandable, and they do where it works. Don't get me wrong, man. I know Sean. He killed that big bull with a rage.
Yeah.
That big bull moose he shot a couple years ago, that was with a rage. So they work until they don't.
Yeah. I have a couple buddies that we talk hand loading continuously, right? And one of my buddies, he's just trying to decide what rifle he's going to build next, right? He's got a 6.5 284. He's got a 280 Ackley. And so he's like, should I build like a trainer, or should I build this, or should I build that? My 280 is enough for this. And I'm like, man, go into a larger caliber, which is much like going to a heavy arrow, right? Going to a larger caliber is going to provide you with that safety margin for when you mess up a little bit, like you shoot an elk with a 338 at 60 yards, it's going to act like you got hit by lightning. You shoot an elk with a freaking, 6.5 Creedmoor, there's a good chance it lives the rest of its goddamn life. You know what?
I fucking watched a video on 6.5 Creedmoors the other day. Yeah. I don't pay attention to them. Never have, but I got looking at them, and I don't know why guys are using them on big game. It's kind of like a pretty light round, hey?
Yeah. Well, it was designed for long range competition shooting, right? It was like it was basically the answer to long range target shooting inside factory ammo. It is. I think it is a great deer round, and I think it is capable of doing a lot. But I think you just have to realize its limits. It's definitely not a long range hunting cartridge. You're not
always going to be. There'll always be guys that be like, "Well, I shot a fucking elephant at 8,000 yards."
Oh yeah, I mean, who's that guy that Joseph Von Benedict talks about in his podcast? It's he talks about a guy that was shooting like elephants with a 22, right? And it's like, okay, great, like that's what he says too. It's like shot. he's got that wicked voice. Like, shot placement matters, but for me, the thump in the shoulder is worth the safety margin, having the margin for error, because when you're in the field, it's not always a 100-yard broadside slam dunk. My bull elk this year, I shot with 140 grain Accubond out of a 280 Ackley, which is awfully light for elk. And it went through one lung, through some organs and all kinds of stuff, did all kinds of damage. The elk he died, but he could have been deader quicker.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Like, shot placement is king too, but you got to have the right bullet too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. So back to the arrow thing, I think it's very similar, right? Where if you're shooting a 325 grain arrow, pushing the absolute lowest limit without your freaking limb shooting off your bow, and you let that thing fly, I think you have to realize that you're going to be down on kinetic energy downrange, right? And if you make a questionable shot, or maybe you hit a rib on the way in, or maybe you, I don't know, maybe on the offside, you hit a shoulder or something, instead of breaking that leg and busting through it, or even like with our setups, like shooting iron willows, like we'll cut through a leg bone. Whereas with that barely heavy enough to shoot out of your bow setup, it's going to stop dead.
I can just tell you one thing, like, when I was talking to my buddy about all this, and he's like, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm sick of this setup, and, or I think he hit a shoulder or something. Yeah. And I just told him, I'm like, if you do everything you can on your end, like everything on your end is correct, ready to go. So if something does happen, say you do not recover an animal, at least you know that you did everything you could. Like, you gave it all, and you tried to have the right setup, and I don't know. I know guys that shoot fucking light arrows and expandables. They will till the day they die. Yeah. And then they work. They do work. So don't get me wrong, but I don't know. Well, you can definitely be more accurate with a lighter setup in terms of judging yardage, just because you have so much less pin gap, right? Like I've built some light arrow setups for shooting target. Like Hunter class is a good one to run a light arrow. Like I was shooting a Matthews Conquest, which is not the fastest bow in the world in the first place. And I was running like a Super Drive 27, I think it was, built pretty light target bow, right? And like my pin gap, my 20 to 60, my 6-pin fixed, for Hunter class 3Ds, like, I don't know, my pin gap was like an inch from 20 to 60 yards, like out of a 40-inch axle to axle bow at 60 pounds. Like, that's the benefit. That's it. Beyond that, I don't see it. Yeah. Like, if you can deal with some pin gap and you're good at judging yardage, like, I don't understand why you would ever even think about going the lighter direction, right? Have you ever had an arrow stop in an animal since you've been shooting a heavy arrow? Well, I'll give you an example here. My last year's compound, I was shooting a prime bow, 2015, 14. And I can't remember that setup now, but I had an Ulmer edge on the front of that thing, which is an expandable. Yeah. And I was using that to hunt whitetails. It's basically a sever, right? For guys. Yeah. So like Rusty Ulmer was the creator of the Ulmer edge, and I think there were some patent issues with Swacker. So they dropped the Ulmer, and I was a huge fan of the Ulmer edge, man. That thing fucking flew. Yeah. But the Ulmer edge turned into the sever. I actually talked to Rusty Ulmer about that broadhead quite a bit. Cool. I have some Ulmers stuck in some scapulas and and some spines. I was going to send them one, but anyway, I was whitetail hunting and I had a moose tag, and a bull moose came in. I grunted a bull moose in,
Nice.
And I shot this, it was a big body bull, and I shot him at about 6 or 8 yards, probably 8 yards, 6 yards. And my arrow and the tip of that ulnar edge was just poking out the hide on the other side. I didn't hit ribs. I didn't, nothing. Just a big bodied bull. And it opened good, and he ran 20 yards and tipped over. So fast forward a couple years, I'm shooting a longbow, the 55-pound reflex deflex longbow. And I'm shooting a heavy, they were Zelor arrows. They were made in Australia for big bone game.
What? I don't even know what those are.
Zelor sold, became Day 6 arrows. So I was shooting Zelor arrows, shitty head on the front. I was shooting DRT heads, but I'd sharpened them, and they'd flew good. So I was shooting 2-blade. They had bleeders, and at 8 yards, I called in a bull moose. Same distance, exact same distance with a longbow, and same shot, broadside. I never found that arrow. That arrow fucking went through that bull.
Oh yeah,
and gone. Never found it. So like, right there, it's 2 comparisons, 2 different pieces of equipment, almost identical shots.
Yeah.
So that was the moment I was like, holy fuck, man! There's something about these heavy arrows and a good sharp broadhead that really works. Like, because I was shooting a bow that was like 100 feet per second slower.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we're like, it's crazy. That was an eye opening moment for me. I was like, okay, now I understand what everyone's talking about. But there has to be because me and Sean dive down this fucking rabbit hole all the time. And Sean's thing is like, yeah, you can shoot a heavy arrow. That's fine. But there's got to be that happy medium. Where is that happy medium line? Because you don't want to be shooting a 600 grain log with your gaps are huge. Because that's the difference of a 48 yard mule deer. You're trying to put your 40 on him high, and you end up dropping in under his heart. If you would have been 500 grain arrow, you probably would have tucked it in there.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be, where's that line? And everyone's got their own line. You just got to find where it is. And the only way you're going to find that is by tuning, shooting arrows, cutting arrows, finding weights, weighing arrows, going through a process of tuning your bow.
Yeah.
And taking the time to learn how to do that shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I think learning how to tune a bow is absolutely critical to your development as an archer, man. Like, a lot of the, a lot of guys will get a bow, and maybe from the factory it has an issue, right? Like, oh, I can't get the tail right tear out of it or something, right? And that's it. They don't know what to do from there. I field quite a few phone calls from friends and friends of friends. Like, hey, I got this issue. What do I do? It's like, you start saying like, oh, on this, put a twist in this cable and see what happens. And there's just silence on the other end of the phone. Right. But I think that's part of being a student of the game is working on your own setup a bit, knowing how to, I've said this a million times, but knowing how to serve, knowing how to tie a D loop. The amount of guys that don't know how to tie a D loop still freaking blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's just shocking, but I feel like it's all the same. It's all part of the same discipline, right? Like, if you want to be a bow hunter, I feel like you need to know how to work on bows at least a little bit. Especially if like you're hunting, like the country I hunt elk in, like, if I go hunt 30 days in a season, the string on that bow will be pooched.
Did you see that video you sent me the other day? It has a pile of views on Instagram, and it's a slow-mo of a guy shooting a bull elk at fucking 90 yards. That fucking arrow, I'm shit you not, that cocksucker was 90 degrees sideways, fucking almost all the way to that bull. Like his bow, and he was acting like he was some big badass hunter. He was like, fucking, I'm over here stroking my ego. and it was a nice bull, and I think he ended up killing it. But that is the worst flying arrow. I just like cringe, and no one says anything. Not a fucking thing in the comments. There, nobody's like, "Hey man, your fucking arrows."
I actually messaged him. I was like, my jaw hit the floor when I watched that video, and there's like a gazillion views on it, and like not one person that I saw in the comments had said anything. And I just sent him. Actually, I think I commented, and I was like, "Is nobody going to point out that arrow could not be spined any weaker out of that bow? Like, what's going on here?" And he commented, he commented, he was like, I shot that bow through paper. It was shooting great, yada, yada, yada. Yeah,
fuck. Okay, here's what, can you explain this to me? I've never been a paper tune guy. I spine my fucking arrows to my bow. So it's fly straight, but you can shoot it through paper, and I get it. But if you're shooting it through paper, why do guys shoot it through paper fletched? Like, your fletchings are. Everyone's like, "Oh, check out my sweet tear with fletched arrows." What is the point? You know what fletchings do? They correct terrible arrow flight. That's what they do. They're the rudder on the back of the arrow that steers the arrow. So when you're shooting a fletched arrow through paper, and you're like, "Oh, sweet tear," that don't tell me nothing. Like, take the fletching off and shoot a bear shaft. Let's see what we're talking about here. You know?
Yeah, sort of where the rubber meets the road on paper tuning with fletched arrows is often when guys are doing it, they're putting the paper too far between them and the bow. If you're in a paper tune a bow, it needs to be like inside of 6 yards.
You're giving that arrow time to correct itself.
And that's just
through paper. I just don't understand, because I see it all the time. Guys are like, "Oh, I got a good tear. I'm tuned with fletched arrows." Well, man.
I feel like the first page of the instruction manual for a bow, when you take it out of the box, the first page should just be the definition of Archer's paradox, right? Like, and I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that your bow, your arrow shaft, when it leaves your bow, it has to bend around the riser. Your riser is not. You don't have a center shot. Like you're however many 1/8 of an inch off of center. And so your arrow has to correct. And the whole way to the target, your arrow will be doing the serpentine. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to mitigate that serpentine, right? You're trying to reel that in. And like you see these guys that just, all they do is move the rest to get arrow flight, right? With a fletched arrow.
Yeah. I heard a guy on the Stickbow Chronicles one time. He's talking. He's like, "Oh, I don't shoot bear shafts at animals. So why would I fuck around and shoot a bear shaft to tune my bow?" Well, look at it like this. Okay, so I get what he's saying. I 100% do. Like, he's tuning with fletches, right? 100%. That's what he's doing. And that's fine. And that probably does work. But at the end of the day, if you can get that arrow to fly at 100% straight, no fletching, could you imagine if you put fletching on it? That thing is going to freaking laser beam, you know?
Well, and the other component of it too is that sounds great. Like, why would you set your bow with bear shaft? But okay, you're gonna freaking screw a sail onto the front of that bastard anyways. Like, everything changes, guys. Like, I don't know. It's wild.
What were you saying? I cut you off there.
I was just talking about Archer's paradox and how on the way to the target that arrow isn't ever flying straight. It doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to fly straight. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the bow tuned to the point where you're as close to perfect arrow flight as you can get. And that way, when you get downrange, that kinetic energy is running linear to the arrow. You're not wasting energy on that head trying to pull that broadhead straight through the animal, right? And it's just like it's like anything. Like, if you have a truck that's dog walking, it's going to drive like shit, right? But if you have an arrow that's dog walking, it's gonna fly like shit. It's going to be inconsistent. It's going to have a crazy, you're going to have a hard time with your lefts and rights and stuff like that.
And another thing too, with I've seen a lot of years with compound guys, just moving the rest. They're like, oh, I got terrible arrow flight. Let's move the rest. Why don't you fix the fucking arrow? Like, get the right arrow, get the right spine. I just, I don't know. I try to get Sean to explain all this shit to me, but I just, to me, like, you're going to bear shaft. You should be bear shafting. And if you can get that right, slap your fletching on, you're good to go.
Should we really quickly do a 5-minute overview on how to tune an arrow to a bow? Like the 5-minute high level view? Yeah,
sure. Give her.
Okay. So what I do, you want me to go first or you want to go?
Go, give her.
Okay. So what I do is I set up my bow, right? So like we'll do compound for compound guys, right? So what I do is I set up my bow, I get everything dialed in, I tie in my peep, get my sight on, get everything rocking, right? And then what I do is I take my rest and I set it to center shot or perceived center shot. So that'll be down the spine of the grip. So like, a lot of these bows have like a molding line on the grip right now with rubber grips, or like on a PSC, like a PSC carbon, you could use a straight edge, right? So you center your rest. And what you do is you take one of your arrows with the components in the front end of it that you'd like to run. And now you're going to have to guess here, right? So like for me, I run a 50 grain iron will insert, a 10 grain collar, and then 100 grain point. So I have 160 in the front of my arrow. Okay. So now I don't cut my arrow shaft. I leave it full length, way too long, right? So I got a 32-inch arrow shaft out of my 28-inch draw 70-pound or 68-pound bow is usually where I like to end up. I will walk outside. I will take my giant target and I will let an arrow rip at 10 yards, right? And the ass end of that arrow will be all the way one direction. It'll probably be super weak, right? And so now what I do, what's tail left is weak, right? Thinking out loud. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So that arrow will be hard tail left. So that bastard will be like, if an animal was facing to the left, the knock of that arrow will almost be hitting that animal in the face. Right. So now what I do is I will go back inside and I will cut 1 inch off the tail end of that arrow. I will pull the knock out, cut 1 inch off, put the knock back in, walk right back outside, shoot that arrow in the same spot. And now that knock of that arrow is going to start slowly working its way right. And when I start getting close, instead of cutting 1 inch, I'm going to start cutting like 8ths or 16ths. And then I'm going to tune that sucker in until at 10 yards, it's perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up. I'm going to back up to 20 yards. Then I'm going to back up to 30 yards. Then I'm back up to 40 yards. And like, it helps to have some dope on your setup while you're doing this, so you can actually hit the target at 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards. But you should be able to get pretty well bang on perfect arrow flight without fletches, bare shaft, nothing else on the arrow. And now if you really, 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 really want to be anal retentive, go inside, weigh your however many vanes you're going to put on the arrow, your fletches, weigh them, weigh one of your wraps, take some electrical tape on the back of your arrow and wrap that amount of weight on the back of it. Just real nice and tidy. So it's not going to make a big bump when it leaves the bow, but you do that and that'll give you perfect arrow flight every time.
Yep.
3-minute setup from Ty. There you go.
Yeah. So with the stick bow, how I over the years have developed mine, and there's a lot of guys that are going to have a lot of different ways of doing this. So say you get a brand new bow and you get it out of the box, I'll string it. I'll set way over brace. Say brace is 7 1/4. I'll set 7 3/4 and I'll leave it for the night.
Nice.
I want to try to let that string stretch in. I'll go ahead and I'll tie just 2 temporary knocks. They're rolling knocks. And so I'll tie them so I can turn them up and down on the serving. I'll take my square. I'll find out where I want to be for my knock height. And that's a good starting point. So then what I do is much of the same as what Ty does. I'll take my full length arrow and I have some heat in glue. It looks like a giant blue glue stick.
Hot melt.
Hot melt. So I'll take hot melt. I'll do my insert, whatever weight I want to run up front. I always have a goal of trying to be around 200 grains up front. That's kind of where my goal is. 180 to just over 200, somewhere in there. Because I want my target arrow weight to be 520 to 580 kind of thing.
Yeah.
So then I'll temporarily glue that in, and I'll start working off the same as Ty, working off the back end of the arrow. And at the same time with the recurve. So a recurve is very influenced by your release. You don't have a clean release like you do with a compound. Mm-hmm. So I see a lot of guys will be tuning with their bow canted how they shoot. I don't do that. I hold my bow perfectly straight up and down. So I'll do multiple. I'll do multiple releases because I want to just to double check if it's weak or stiff, because your release can really influence it on a stick. So I'll shoot 5 or 6 or whatever times, and then I'll just do the same process, start sawing off the back end till I get my length that I need. And I'll do the same thing. I'll put a little electric tape on the back to mimic the weight and go through that. Mm-hmm. Once I find where that is, then what I'll do, once I find that arrow is flying good, I'll start playing with my brace. If Jared, I can't remember what Tolkien said, whether you say 7 1/4 to
I don't know. I have it written down.
7 3/4. But I'll move up in brace, and then I'll find out where your bow is going to have a sweet spot. It's going to be like where for your draw and that bow pound is. There's going to be a sweet spot where it's the loudest or the quietest. It's going to be the quickest. You got to just find that spot. So I'll work up, and then I'll work down.
Yeah, it'll be obvious, I think, when you find it, right?
Yeah, it'll be obvious. Once I find that, I'll make a mark. And because when you're doing that, when you're changing your brace, your knock height's going to change. So you're going to start getting up and down kicks, which is fine. You can fix that after. All I'm looking for is my brace. Once I find my brace, I'll go ahead and I'll put permanent knocks on with that brace. And this is a very important thing now when you're shooting this bow and you're in hunting season, you always have to check your brace. I check my brace before each hunt. Like literally when I'm leaving the truck, I check brace, because if you leave your bow strung for a couple days and your brace drops, you're going to get a weird kick of your arrow hitting the shelf. So you want to make sure your brace is always right where it needs to be. Very important. So once I find or even I got a spot that I mark on some arrows that matches on the spot on the riser. As long as it's within, right there, that's not a big deal. You don't need to pack a square all the time. Just use your arrow to measure, You know what
I started doing after a goat, sorry to cut you off, after a goat hunt last year, I now take a silver Sharpie and I put the throat of my knock in the kind of the heel of my grip, like where you brace a recurve from, and then I mark it on the string, mark it on the arrow shaft rather. So it's super consistent. But I started doing that after watching you with your recurve. I was like, man, this guy has checked brace height no less than 100 times before we hiked in.
So then, what was I going to say here? So once you find your brace and you get I got to get Mitch. I want to do a little video. Mitch showed me a new way how he ties his knocks on his serving. Yeah, man, it's fucking slick.
And I think we do it the same way, to be honest.
It's a nail knot. I've always tied nail knots, but he ties this nail knot, and on our moose hunt he showed me last year. We tied on a couple new knocks on my bow. Man, it's a slick way. But anyway, I tie my knocks on where I want them, and then your brace is right, your knocks are right, and then I'll take the that arrow I tuned off, and I'll put it under hot water, pull all the inserts out, clean it all up, get it ready. And then the rest of the arrows, I'll trim a little bit off the front end, square it. I'll square that front end of that arrow. Yeah. And then I'll start working off the back end, cut them all down to where they need to be. Back or front end, doesn't matter. And once you get your arrows all the right length, glue your inserts in. I use, what the fuck glue do I use? I was going to say Goat Tough, but I don't think it is. Oh, it's called a Boning's iron insert. It takes 24 hours. It's like an epoxy, 24 hours to cure. You'll never lose an insert with that shit. I've tried Gold Tips glue and all sorts of shit. I've always lost inserts, but that stuff's good. Yep. And that's it, man. That's your final arrow. And you can't really control on a new bow. You can't really control where you want the weight to be. You kind of can, but the components I want to use and the broadhead weight I want to use, that's where I end up. So sometimes I'm just a bit heavier than I would have liked. And sometimes I'm just a bit lighter than I would have liked, but I'm always in. That's why I don't ever say like I want to shoot a 550, because it's hard to get there. If you're tuning your arrow correctly to the bow, it's hard to just be like, I'm going to get 550. That way I could be like, I want to be 520 to 580. Yeah. Like you can, if you give yourself some flexibility, you can get to that. You just got to fuck with it a bit. And one other thing too, I want to touch on, and this was brought up to me a few years ago. Some hardcore trad guys were talking about it, and I do agree with this. Is arrow slap. When some guys will run a X long arrow because that's their point on, and they're gap shooting there, but they're using the arrow tip to aim. Yep, which is fine. But some of these guys have ungodly lengths of arrow sticking out in front of their wrist, so they can have a 30-yard fucking whatever. So, but the problem with that is if you hit an animal with that setup, it probably will kill that animal, but the tail of your arrow is just going to be slapping, and that's a lot of lost energy. You want that arrow to be kind of as short as you can, so when it hits, it's driving in. You're not losing a lot of energy. That arrow is slapping up and down or back and forth or whatever, right? Yeah.
And to speak to that point just quickly, if you're having a hard time tuning, go stiffer, don't go weaker. Shooting a stiff arrow out of your bow, it might track sideways, but it'll track a lot less sideways than a weak arrow. And a weak arrow will damn well do a 180, like that guy we're talking about on Instagram. But a stiff arrow will just have some yaw to it, and then you can kind of get away with dealing with veins. But that being said, do it properly. Do some kind of walk back tune, paper tune, French tune, whatever you want to do. Get your arrows flying straight. Be huge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then with the stick, if you have a bad release, it's really going to show up in your arrow, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well,
practice. That's what you can do.
That's what I mean. So if you have a bad release and you're having a hard time tuning, that's might be as best you're going to get. And
here's something, just a bit of a cold hard truth. How often do I send you a check-in video on my shooting? Like, I don't know. Often. Like weekly, maybe not lately, but normally weekly. Like, here's a video from the side. Here's a video from behind. What's up? And you're like, looks good, or fix this.
I spent so many years picking my own form apart and just like working on releases and working on tuning bows. When somebody sends me a video, I can just like 30 seconds. I can tell you what the fuck is going on with your release.
Oh yeah.
So like, it's important to try and get the best release you can. I have bad releases all the time.
All right. So you heard it here first, folks. Send videos of yourself shooting and send photos of your wife to Wacey. There you go.
But if the people just take a little bit extra time, when I tune a bow, I make sure I got nothing going on in that afternoon. Like I'll spend the day fucking around. Like basically by the end of it, I got a couple dozen arrows built, ready for the season. Like I want to make sure it's right. And once you're there, you're good, man. So, it's like, it's just something you got to just get in your toolbox and learn how to do, right? It's not hard once you start doing it. And like, here's a caveat to what we're talking about. It's a little bit expensive. I bought my own arrow saw because the next closest arrow saw to me is over 2 hours away at the nearest archery shop. There's no archery shops where I live. I'm in the middle of fucking nowhere. So I buy my own tools, my own components. I have my own. I got guys that come over to my house all the time to cut arrows. Buddies from all around will drive here to cut arrows. There's no arrow saws. So I bought my own arrow saw years ago so I can do this kind of stuff. So if you don't have an arrow saw and you can't afford one, talk to a pro shop and say, hey, do you mind if I spend an afternoon in here working on some arrows? I don't think there's a pro shop out there that's going to say no, because they'll let you come in. You can be like, yeah, I want to just trim some arrows and see if I can bare shaft. I think any pro shop would let you do that. Hey?
Or even just take them an arrow and have them do it if they won't let you.
So
there we go. Cool. There you have it. I got to take kids to school. You good?
Yeah, man. I just want one more thing. I appreciate everyone with the positive messages about the podcast and stuff. I do appreciate everybody. I try to answer most guys, if I don't answer you, I'm not being a dick. I do appreciate all the positive messages and stuff from everyone. It means a lot to us.
I think we should make a new slogan for our podcast. Like, don't be an asshole and have fun.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. Like be nice to everyone.
Just be a good human all around. That's just pretty simple.
Be a good human. Don't make people feel bad for dumb shit. Like, it doesn't matter what camo you wear or bow you shoot. There you go. How about like tune your arrows and don't be I was going to say a bad word, but don't be a jerk.
Don't be a prick. Just be nice.
Tune your arrows. Don't be a prick. There you go.
All right.
Right on, bro.
I'll talk to you later.
Ciao. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. You can follow us on Instagram at Wilderness Locals. If you want to support the podcast, please check out the gear, articles, and whatever else we're up to on the website at www.wildernesslocals.net.